maybe you will never hear that clock ticking, and maybe you will never wake up feeling you want a baby now because you're so focused on your business, you're so passionate about what you do. So, for some of us, we have to plan this and we have to make it a rational decision, although kind of society tells us that we will feel it and at some point you just want it. Maybe that never comes.
This is Melanie.
And this is Christian.
You're listening to Follow the Gradient, the weekly podcast with actionable insights about how to build a business while staying sane. Today's episode is about a tension a lot of female founders quietly feel, but almost no one talks about honestly. How do you build and scale a company while also leaving room for motherhood? Because the years in which your company needs the most from you are often the exact same years in which biology is least patient. Our guest today is Julia Bösch, co-founder of Outfittery. In 2012, she and Anna Alex started the company in Berlin and built it into one of Europe's leading fashion tech businesses, pioneering online personal shopping through a combination of human stylists and AI. Today, the company operates in more than 10 European markets, serves more than 3 million customers, and has hundreds of employees. Last year, Outfittery merged with its longtime Spanish competitor Loquiero to create the strongest European player in online personal shopping. While building that company over more than a decade, Julia had to make deeply personal decisions about fertility, timing, and whether starting a family could coexist with leading a company at that scale. But before we jump into one of our most personal conversations so far, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at followthegradient.io, where Julia also answered a few additional questions we did not cover in this episode. But now, enjoy the conversation with Julia. Julia, in 2012, you and Anna Alex, your co-founder, started Outfittery in Berlin. And a few years later, you were scaling across 10 markets with hundreds of employees. And somewhere in that window, you realized that biology was running on a completely different clock than your company. Can you take us back inside the moment when that collision became real, not just theoretically, but really as a decision that you actually had to make?
Yeah, so I was in my early 30s, and it probably was around year 4 or 5 of building Outfittery when this came up. So I was in the middle of building up Outfittery with full passion, all my heart, all my energy was in that. And we were doubling the business every year. So things were super excited. I tried to keep up with the pace of the company. And in that time, I did some reflection, and I actually, at the time, I didn't have a partner. And I also did not hear any clock ticking, but I knew that I wanted to have kids at some point in the future. Definitely not at that point of time, but somewhere in the future. So my best friend actually read an article about egg freezing, and he insisted that I would look into this option as an option to improve my chances of having kids in the future, as it was quite clear at that moment that it would be later in life for me.
Mhm.
And that's what I did.
And you said it yourself, you found out about egg freezing in your early 30s, while Outfittery was already at real scale. So all the messiness that we know, and at the same time growth. How did you think about it, not just medically, but strategically? Did you approach it as a business decision, as it sounds, or take us through the thought process?
This was actually a quite rational process and rational decision for me, because I saw this as an opportunity to increase my chances of having children later in life. And I learned in the process that it's definitely not an insurance, but it's a
No.
way of improving your chances. And this opportunity had big value to me. And I also got the advice from another female founder who said, maybe you will never hear that clock ticking, and maybe you will never wake up feeling you want a baby now because you're so focused on your business, you're so passionate about what you do. So for some of us, we have to plan this and we have to make it a rational decision, although kind of society tells us that we will feel it, and yeah, at some point you just want it. Maybe that never comes. Maybe it's just what I also had, this strong wish that at some point you have children, but it will never be an imminent want,
Yeah.
so to say. I like the question because also many times when I talk about egg freezing, especially to other women, the response is, yeah, but this is such a scientific way of doing something so innately human. And if it doesn't work out for me, in terms of work out for me to have children, maybe it's meant to be. That, I don't know, I struggle with that because there are so many areas in life where we plan for and we try to optimize and we get help. And I feel like having kids is, or let's put it the other way, for people who want kids but are struggling to have them, it's one of the most challenging life events. And why would I not, if there is an opportunity, take the option or at least look into it to improve my chances? So, yeah, it is quite a rational approach that I took. But yeah, I think for some women, it's actually a good way in.
Uh-huh. And can you take us through the process? How did it actually look like while you were running the company? Because I know that from friends who have gone through, and at first you think that's just like taking out eggs, whatever, but it's actually like there are hormone treatments, appointments, uncertainty, and the business doesn't pause. So you
Mm.
also your body changes. So what did that feel like behind the scenes?
For me, it was, so first of all, it was definitely the best investment I've ever done, best investment of my life. And then secondly, how did it feel? I did 2 cycles, and you basically do the hard part of IVF, which means you stimulate your body to produce more than one egg cell per cycle. So the goal is, yeah, to have 10, 15, maybe even more eggs in one cycle. And it means that for 10 to 15 days, you have to inject hormones to stimulate your ovaries. And for me personally, and that is very different for everybody, but for me, my body coped very well with it. So I was traveling, I just took the stuff with me, and also the injections I got used to. And then you have to do an extraction. So you get a sedation or full anesthesia to take out the egg cells and actually freeze them. And for me, the first cycle was quite disappointing. So we only got, I think, 6 egg cells or so. So that was a downer.
Yeah.
And in that second, when they told me how many eggs they had, I said, okay, I'll do it again. So a few months later, I did a second cycle. And then in total, I had around 15 egg cells that were frozen. And the process was, again, from a body perspective, it was absolutely okay for me. There are other women who feel it way more. Every time I took the day of the egg cell extraction off just to be able to also celebrate the moment, because
Much.
I felt like I had really invested and done something for my future self, my future family. It was an interesting process. Yeah.
And did anyone at work know about it, or how did you go about this topic?
No, I didn't share it with anybody at work. I did share it with my family, and I did share it, which was quite funny, with my boyfriend at the time, which is now my husband. So I met him when I had already made the decision to do the egg freezing. And I told him, if you want to come, it has nothing to do with us at this point, but if you want to join, be my guest. So he was already there, which was interesting looking back. And then also with family, it was an interesting conversation because I think they weren't sure whether I wanted to have kids. Yeah. But at work,
Ah.
nobody knew.
And your co-founder also didn't know.
No, she knew. She knew.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So
She
she knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm asking that question because I feel like also based on the conversation that we had previously to this conversation, I found that we're both actually have something in common and we're both relatively private about personal topics. And
Mhm.
yet yet we both decided to talk about this in this podcast. You talked about it very in lengthy forms, which I so appreciated when reading your site interview back, I think, 3 years ago. And you once said talking about egg freezing made you feel nervous and vulnerable, but also hopeful it might help other women. So, given that you're normally a very private person, and now we're talking about the most intimate topic that
It's
I
quite
can
funny,
imagine for
right?
a woman,
Yeah.
why was it worth saying out loud?
Yeah, it's been an interesting process. So, to your question, back then when I actually did the process, I didn't share it with anybody. I felt it was very personal.
Mm,
And when my daughter was born, I felt like I'm the luckiest person in the world that actually I had her through the frozen eggs, and we
yeah.
probably wouldn't have a child without that.
Mhm,
So I just felt so blessed and lucky that I wanted to give this back to the world. And if just one woman, one family can benefit from this, it's worth it. That's why I really wanted to share it. I still reflected on it and discussed with my husband whether we want to share it because of our child, because
yeah.
we just cannot ask her and it's part of
Yeah.
her identity. But
Yeah.
we hope that it will make her proud one day. So that's why we decided to do it. And my goal really is for women in their late 20s, early 30s to think about and find out about their fertility and look at it as part of preventative health. And also look at egg freezing just as an option. It's not for everybody, but I want people to know there is this option. And then you
Mhm,
can make your own decision. And the other aspect of it also is that I realized when starting to talking about it, that in Germany or let's say the DACH region,
mhm,
there is this dialogue about getting support in fertility is like very secretive. And
mhm,
in the US or in the UK, that's super, like, people talk about it way more openly. So for example, I had a business partner in the UK and he canceled our meeting saying, "Oh, we're in an IVF treatment and it didn't work out. So I need this time now for my family." And I was like, "Oh, wow. Okay. But this is fantastic." I hope that by more and more people sharing their own story, we can also have a more open dialogue about this.
and maybe and decide for yourself if you want to answer it, but once you had the accent, then maybe also once you realize that maybe like the way to just randomly get pregnant wasn't your way, but like scaling a business while then also thinking, okay, now is the right time to actually become a mom. Was this very intent? In your case, it probably was intentional, but what made you then say, okay, now is the right time? Because I feel like also from a personal standpoint, there's never the right time to now say, now I go into that and I'm pregnant for the next 9 to 10 months and then become a mom.
Yeah. Yeah, it was exactly what you say. I never woke up and felt like this is the right moment. We really, with my husband, we just said, okay, it's now or never, because I was already in my late 30s. So
Mhm.
if we're serious about starting a family, we just have to do it now. So that's how we did it. So it was, yeah,
Yeah.
as you say, it never feels like this. Oh, now, wow, this is a great pause.
No,
Now the business is super calm. This just never happens.
no, it doesn't. And I think there I can maybe also share my thinking behind it. I also didn't know like when is the right time. You never know. There is
Mm.
always something to do, as there's always work to do, as we all know as founders. But the only thing I knew, and not everyone knows that, but I, like you, I knew if I have the kind of luck to become a mom, then I would always regret it to not have, if it doesn't happen, I would always ask myself, did I
Mhm.
wait too long? And I think
Yeah,
that was then, and then the rest is sometimes luck, biology, or you actively go there. But I think
yeah,
that is something that I regret, that I thought my 80-year-old would regret that if she waited until 40 plus.
absolutely, absolutely. And also, this can be a longer process, right?
Yeah,
So we were
very
super lucky
much.
because it worked on the first
Yeah.
try, but I thought this would take months or years.
which it does for many. Now, I would also like to bring in another aspect or story from my own experience, because I feel like there it is where it stops being theoretical, especially for
Mhm.
me. I became a mom shortly after we raised 80 million from Sequoia in a Series B round. My partner also is a founder, but at that time he was still in pre-seed stage.
Mhm.
And in a few moments, I noticed something very particular. So on paper, I was basically running the larger company story, and yet it was the one I was the one people actually quietly wondered about whether I would still do this, whether I would step back, and it wasn't him. So my question to you is: this something you also have experienced, that different perception of mom and dads in the startup scene?
Interestingly, I personally wasn't confronted with this so
Mhm.
much. So for me, it was rather that people on my team, my family, I think they were just really surprised that I was
Mhm.
pregnant and having a baby. So they were, that
How
was
did that
rather what
happen?
I got confronted with. And then the worry, especially for my family throughout, I would say, the first year, can she really cope with this? Because as it's super tough to have two babies, a business baby and a human baby at the same time. So I didn't have that so much, but I definitely see how society sees moms and dads differently. So in my case, my husband took a very active role. So he's what I would say the primary caregiver. And he gets a lot of credit for that. And he's saying this himself that it's interesting that he gets credit for things where moms, it would just be taken as standard procedure, but he's still enjoying it.
You mentioned one thing which I found pretty interesting, and we hear that a lot, obviously, is this phrase baby or business. And often it's the question, shouldn't it be baby and business? So, what do you think about this tension? Is that a real tension to an extent, is to the extent that we have to make a decision, baby or business, in the sense of scale up, startup? Or is that a tension which is self reinforced through a system which is dominated by male timelines?
So I definitely don't think it's an or. I think we deserve and we can have both, but it needs a very good system and a great partner and great planning. And also I think it depends on the stage your company is in. So in my case, my company was 10 years old. I had more than 300 employees, an executive team that I could lean on. It's not impossible, but definitely way harder in the super early phase of the company. And it also, yeah, depends very much on the partner and the support you get there.
And I want to come to one perspective of the, let's say, male co founder or male colleagues or investors who may genuinely mean well, but do not fully understand the situation some women are in or the experiences they have. So, maybe to start with this misperception, like what have you seen personally or in your environment? What's the one thing male co founders, investors, board members really underestimate about a female founder experience around fertility, pregnancy, and obviously early motherhood?
So I think it's just generally very hard to imagine what it feels like to be pregnant and have a baby and this very first year. Because for me, Outfittery was my first baby, and I felt and I feel so connected and fully responsible. And now I suddenly have a second baby, a human baby that literally depends on me. And as a first time mom, also you get reborn in a way. So there is a lot happening with your identity, with your body. You want to take care of your business. You have a baby. So I think especially the first year of having a baby is just very tough to find your new way of being and settling into this new phase. But it also gave me a lot of strength. I don't know, breastfeeding, doing meetings, everything at the same time also feels okay. If I can handle this, come on.
You can
I can add like anything. The female body is also incredible. Yeah. But Melanie, how was it? How was it for you? How would you answer this question?
Yeah, I think it's just like we don't have the luxury to wait until we're 40 plus to take a decision. We can wait and then the decision is taken from us. But just this fact of that we also have this part, and I completely agree. Like in the end, I'm 100% sure it is possible to have both. It's just a question of how. And like it starts with the selection of your partner, it goes on with the setup that you have. It also goes on with what you self. Sometimes we tend to be very perfectionistic, and I think that is something that you have to throw away once you enter motherhood, at least, because you cannot do everything at the same intensity. But I really think that this being afraid, maybe, at least for me, it was more about I knew I was able to do that. I knew I was like I had the right people around me and so on. But what I couldn't control was the perception from others, and the perception is not even a problem. But I think sometimes I found out that they took decisions, and I saw that also with others, not just with me, that they took decisions based on their own world view. So for
Mm-hmm.
example, like you during maternity leave, I got asked to speak on a stage after I would have returned, and then someone just thought, oh, that's probably too early, so I'll just like forward it to
Mm.
someone else, which is fine. It's just like that showed me like I would have gone there because it's my decision, it's my life.
Mm.
So I decided for that. It's a very private thing. I can't just not hide it, especially when you're pregnant. But that others take decisions for yourself, that you
Mm.
cannot control. And that was really something that I struggled the most with, because I felt, hey, that's my thing. And as long as I can do the work and the outcome, then nobody should care whether I have one or two or three kids. Others have hobbies. I have to take care
Mm.
of elderly parents. And that I think I'm not sure whether everyone is aware of their own biases that they then
Yeah.
apply to your colleagues.
Yeah. Yeah, that's also something I observed in with others, that if suddenly they get asked about the baby and not the business, and it comes from a good place, as
Yeah,
people want to show interest for
exactly.
your life, but then you're like, hey, I'm still here, the business person and the founder, so take me as that. And
Yeah.
yeah, as you
Yeah.
say, don't limit that. But at the same time, I just want to say one thing, because I think this whole complex how to combine baby and business is also keeping women from founding businesses in the first place. And I actually think that although kind of it has its complexities, it's absolutely possible. And it's actually easier to do that as a founder
Yes.
versus being in an executive role or in any role really in a corporate. Because as a founder, you can define your setup, you can define your way of doing it. And that just gives you so much more options and more flexibility, and is, I think, so much easier.
Yeah. And
You're
it also
nodding. Yeah.
very very much, because it nurtures also like each other, I felt, because also the
Hmm.
adaptability. And just in a startup, you never have stuff for granted. Like you think you're on like the customers here, blah blah, and then suddenly they churn, and like things change all the time. It's the exact same with a baby. You can never plan. Like it's just like you take it and you do the best out of it. And I felt like what I had already with my first baby, the company, I could really apply to my human baby, but also the other way around. Like just being like more flexible and just take it as it comes and make the best out of it. I think that really helped me to be a better leader, a better founder, like a better person to actually scale a business.
Totally. Yeah. And the
Yeah,
resilience you build is just,
Yeah.
it's the
I,
best
I
training.
remember in an interview of Annalena Baerbock when she was asked like how
Uh,
she dealt with being when she became the foreign minister, and then she also talked about how actually principles from early motherhood, like eat when you can eat, sleep when you can sleep, prepared her way better than these life principles,
100%.
whatever, optimize your sleep or
yeah.
something, for what was to come. I found that pretty
Mm.
inspiring.
Very much.
What is actually on that front one, let's say, behavior which you think maybe some male colleagues think is very supportive or show, but which you think is actually not helpful at all?
So, yeah, what I said earlier with the kind of asking for how's the family all the time. And then the other thing is when you're pregnant and you make a plan for when the baby is there, don't tell women the plan won't work. I think we all know we have to be flexible, but just don't tell them it won't work from your experience because you have 4 kids. Just don't. So I think what's helpful is to tell women, we're here for you, tell us what you need. And I was lucky enough that my board was very much understanding. So I presented my plan A and my plan B and my plan C. And they were like, okay. And they just told me, yeah, okay, you want to be back after 2 months full time? Okay. If you're back full time, we're super happy. And if you want to take more time, that we'll also make it work. So that felt very safe. Yeah.
It's like maybe extending to this, if I now really put myself into a position of a male co-founder or colleague, and your female co-founder or colleague tells you, okay, I'm pregnant or I'm going through a fertility treatment, and at the same time the business side is exploding, what should be my first instinct?
Just show support. I think you don't have to fake it. I don't think you need to pretend like you're super happy. We all know it also comes with challenges, but just show the support and be there to make it work as partners.
And maybe also talking like about partners in the very literal sense of your life partner. You once wrote something that I 100% agree is that one of the most important decisions and really career decisions is your partner choice. And maybe on this, can you explore for those that might think, why is this a career choice? It's more a romantic choice. Why is it not a romantic statement, but actually a very operational truth for especially ambitious women?
So I was very lucky to have found a man who is, I would say, confident enough to be the primary caregiver in our case. So
Mhm.
I think this is something that takes a lot of calmness, as I said, self confidence. And it means that when our child is sick, he takes care. When Kita is closed, he takes care. And there's a lot of different models for how you do this. But my own ability to build a business, my freedom, very much depends on my partner. And we have one model, other people have other models. But
Mhm.
to be even able to sit down and have a very open conversation around what do you need, what do I need, where do we get support, how do we do this whole thing financially, was absolutely key for us. And therefore, I think, of course, it's a romantic decision, but in
Hopefully.
the end, it well is a career decision. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And if we stay like practical, are there other things like that women, but also men listening now? And I don't think they need another uplifting message to say that it is
Mm.
possible, but really the practical side of it, like what are the mechanics, so to say? Like what are the actual conditions that need to be in place so that both is possible? Partner, setup, system, company stage. Are there other factors that help if they are there, or that you can make sure that they're there in order to feel comfortable that it is somehow possible?
Yeah. So I'll tell you my take, and then I'm also
Mhm.
interested in yours. For me, first, learning that I had from also other female founders who already have had a family before I did was invest as much as you can into support. And even if it, at the face of it, looks financially insane, do it
Yeah.
because it's an investment into your future, your family, the stability of you, your partnership, everything basically. So invest into nannies, babysitters, house cleaners, outsource as much as you can. Don't do anything you don't want to do. And that's, I think, number one, because otherwise it's just from a time perspective, it becomes
Doesn't work.
impossible, but also from an energy perspective, it's not possible. Secondly, you need to learn to be okay to have somebody else take care of your baby, which is a process. And it's okay if you're struggling with it at times, but it's something you have to get used to very early. And then, thirdly, I think a very open conversation with your partner of how you want to design your setup And it doesn't have to be, people always talk about 50-50. It doesn't have to be 50-50. It can also be, for some time, it's 20-80, and then it's the other way around. So there's a lot of different setups. But I think the important part is having that conversation, and also not having it only once, but it will change. So my husband and I were on a regular basis renegotiating
Yeah.
who does what. And it feels not so romantic, because you're basically going through what are all the to-dos that we have in a week, and who does what, and who does which appointment, and who cleans this and that. But yeah, this is very much necessary to have a good system, and then a freer life. That would be my main takes.
100%. And just to be clear, you can have a plan, but then you always deviate,
Of
I think. So I totally agree with that. I think also, like you said, it's sometimes unromantic, but it just helps the most. Like every week looks different, especially when you're in startup land. And so also, like, for example, having a shared calendar where you actually put in the meetings that are happening, if you, for example, have calls with the US in the evening, so that it's clear who is taking the baby and when, and really the support system around it, and really this open communication with your partner. And as you said, it's not just once. Hopefully you talk about it before you become pregnant, and while you are pregnant, and when the baby's here, when you're back to work. And then it's a constant negotiation, like which meeting is now maybe more important. It's also then again, like society, like for example, I had to ignore a few of the calls from daycare because they always called me when the baby was sick, which I'm totally happy to do. But it was more that it was just a default. And by now, like they just call whoever is available, which I think is more than on the mental load, very important that you also share that. And I think then one thing which is so easy to say, but sometimes so hard to know to do, is really the ability that you don't care about what anyone else except your child and your partner thinks about, and what your gut feeling tells you what is best for your family. Because in the end, that's the only thing that counts. And yes, it's very easy to challenge it and to criticize it and to have your own view, but in the end, nobody knows how this kid turns out. The only thing that you can do is that in the moment you do the best that you can, and whatever this means for me. And I think for me it's very important, there is not for me a life model that is right or wrong. I just think it's up to you as parent and the kid only to decide what is best. And I feel that sometimes gets forgotten in all of these discussions, because it's so easy to judge but so hard to implement.
Totally.
One thing that I was also mentioning before is also that one of the kind of like ingredients of that it might work or not work, or can also be the stage where you're in as a startup. So if I want to be very critical, I could ask, it's all nice what you're talking about, Julia and Melanie, about like having the setup, having the team, having everything in a scale phase, the money, especially after Series B. But is this all just possible for women who are well established, so to say, and have a large team? Or can a woman and man who wants to become a dad, who's pre-Series A and doesn't have a team, doesn't have somebody to delegate, maybe doesn't have the money for childcare infrastructure, can they really have both? Or what would you suggest to them?
It's really hard to generalize this.
Yeah.
Definitely the more established and stable, although it's never stable, your company is, the better. Yeah, it's really, and I always think it's possible. So yes, it's possible, but is it harder? Probably. Yeah.
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 But it
100%.
definitely is possible. And
Yeah.
even if you have a company that looks stable and financially sound, we both know that in the next moment this can change. So you never know. There's so many female founder friends that I have that had to come back to the business 2 weeks after giving birth because there was some crisis. Yeah, you just never know.
So much. And again, like there is never the right timing, so to say. Now maybe on the also the positive side of motherhood, you've said that motherhood made you a stronger CEO. You were more present, more focused, more empathetic. When did you first realize that motherhood was not only something you had to manage around, but really it was actually changing the way you lead, like your teams and maybe also yourself for the better?
Yeah. Yeah, that was very interesting. I didn't expect that, actually. One of my mentors once told me having children makes you multidimensional. And I didn't fully understand what she meant until I experienced it myself. So I've always received the criticism from my team that I'm so rational and that it's hard to connect to me and that I should try to be more empathetic. And that very much changed with pregnancy. I think it didn't only change the perception that others had of me, so my team being able to connect with me in a different way, but it also biologically changed me. So it definitely helped me connect more with people, be more empathetic, but it also helped me look at life more holistically and therefore prioritize my energy better. Not only because I have like only 24 hours in a day, but also it puts the priorities in the right place. And I don't, like before, I used to over invest and overthink some aspects, and I do that less now.
Yeah. And maybe also for the reality check, what do you think is still genuinely hard?
It's still hard to be present all the time with where I am. So, for example, I would read, like it happens to me all the time that I read a bedtime story to my daughter
Mhm.
and I have no clue what I'm reading because in the back of my mind, I'm solving some business issue. So, yeah, splitting the time, but especially also my energy is absolutely challenging, no question.
Let's build directly on that point because at Follow the Gradient, we also have the promise of, okay, how to scale a business from Europe while staying sane. And things like burnout or depression, they often come from the very subjective perception that you have too many obligations you have to juggle and you can't
Mhm.
escape. So, how do you personally approach this? What is your mental model or specific system that you build around yourself so that you can really stay sane while juggling all of these different responsibilities?
Yeah. So I have different elements here. I have coaches that I work with. I have, on the one hand side, a business coach who really helped me become a better leader over the last 10 years. This was like so many crucial moments for me. But I also have a psychologist for the, like, I did some really understanding of my own triggers and how my own psyche works, because the better I understand myself, the better I can lead myself, but also others. And also for times where it was really tough, this was helpful to get the perspective of what's happening with me. And then, secondly, I have peer groups. I'm part of EO, so Entrepreneurs Organization, where I meet with seven other entrepreneurs every month for nearly 10 years now. And this has been a like fantastic support to learn from the experience of the others, but also to have this regular check-in, to have to write down what has been my most intense feeling, what are my biggest struggles, and to be able to share that with the others has been so helpful. And I also have another group, which is a female founder group in Berlin, which, yeah, especially for the topic that we're talking about, how to combine having children and business, has been so helpful because I felt like, okay, they've done it. I've heard all the stories of how they did it, how they struggled, which I felt prepared me for jumping into this adventure myself. Yeah, and then the other way I stay sane is I found out for myself I need to move. So meditation, I don't know, it doesn't work for me. My main way is dancing. I love all kinds of dancings, and it also, you have to concentrate so much that it helps me forget about all the business challenges. That's what I found out is the best for me.
Do you have a specific tool or method or technique which people could or which you would really recommend people to use to keep their long-term balance in life?
To keep their long-term balance. Melanie, you actually alluded to one of my favorite exercises, which is to, or I think you alluded to it, which is to picture your 80th birthday and think about who should be there with you, where does it take place, what do people say about you. And that really helps to prioritize what's important in life. And for me, in that exercise, it came up that there are actually grandchildren. So then I was like, okay, if there are grandchildren, maybe I should
Must be something
get
else.
going on this. So yeah, that's I think working backward from there and think about your values and your priorities is super helpful. And I've created, and this is part of the entrepreneurs organization's principles, to create a life pilot from that, where you really write down what are your main values, what are your main goals, and I revisit that every single year, and that's very helpful to just create the clarity for myself.
And
What are yours, Christian and Melanie? I'm interested.
What I certainly, and we have talked about that also on the podcast, but I think it's now 7 or 8 years ago where I found this annual life review template. And it's basically, it consists of a lot of questions, more long term or short term, but really also the question of where do you see yourself, but also what gives you energy, which people give you energy, and all of these questions. And every year I tell myself like I want to do that on a monthly basis, but then I never do it. But at least at the last week of December, I then sit down and do it. And it really helps just to put everything into perspective, to also see patterns. Sometimes you have it year after year again, and then suddenly it's okay, finally I have managed. And sometimes it's just characteristics that probably will be hard to solve. So that is certainly for a more short-term view. But I truly believe that if you can visualize yourself into being 80 and looking back, I feel like there it's also a lot of the questions that you now think, oh, it's super important to be there to blah, blah. Suddenly you realize, will I ever remember that I went there? Or is it more that I spent the most fantastic, let's say, holidays with my family or my best friends or whatever it is? And it just shifts a little bit the perspective. And I feel it makes you also calmer in the daily hustle of scaling a company. But what about you, Christian?
Yeah, it's this concept of putting yourself into the shoes of you're 80 years old and then thinking backwards from that. I think that's super, super powerful. So I find that very helpful for really big decisions in life. I think what then is a completely different story is how you go from week to week or month to month, right? Because it's one thing to make big decisions, and that's already pretty hard. And I think it's really important that you have a consciousness about what are your big decisions in life. But then once you do that, life just gets plugged into whatever your plans were, right? So there is another call, another client, another colleague, a private matter of family, a matter of friends. And then it's very easy, I think, to get stuck in that situations that you have these 10 obligations in life and you genuinely think they are all hugely important, but you realize you only have time for six. And one technique I found pretty helpful for the short term then to navigate this is journaling. So it really doesn't matter how you do it, if you have like write-ups on a weekly basis or some form of diary, and you can have different versions for private life and like business life. But techniques like really thinking, okay, what do I want to do tomorrow? Like the three things I want to do and only these three, or maybe learning from, I plan to do five and I only had time for two. So maybe it's better tomorrow to just focus on two instead of again putting myself five tasks on. And these can be private and business. It's because life is private and business. And I think I found this super, super helpful, this type of journaling. But as you said, you need to also have time to take off. You cannot have the expectation that you're always being super strong and productive and always there and then always funny and having a crazy work day and then at night making crazy jokes and going out with friends and with your partner and family. You need to acknowledge that your body and your inner self need time where you don't execute on something. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And do you know the WOOP framework? Because
No,
that's something that when I listen to you, find very helpful. So I also sit down on a yearly basis to, again, you start from my 80th birthday. Is it still the same birthday? And then work through what are my goals for the year. And one of the challenges we all know is we set goals and then life happens. And WOOP stands for, so for every single goal that you have for the year, you would define 4 things. The first one is wish. So W wish, define what you want to accomplish. Then secondly is the outcome. So visualize the best possible result that would happen. And then comes the interesting part, which is obstacle. So what will be, knowing yourself, what will be the internal barrier, the emotion, the habit, whatever that will hold you back. And P stands for plan. So you already plan for, if that obstacle occurs, this is what I'll do. And I found that to be very helpful to actually get to my goals. WOOP.
Super powerful.
Yeah. I think time is running up. So unfortunately, we have to start closing down. So we're moving to the last section, the rapid fire question section. So we're just going to ask you one short question and you can answer with whatever comes to your mind. So the first one, egg freezing, empowerment tool, insurance policy, or a symptom of a system that still hasn't caught up?
Clearly empowerment tool. Unfortunately, not an insurance.
One thing motherhood gave your leadership that surprised you?
Radical prioritization of energy. Not so much time, but prioritizing energy and what gives me energy.
One thing women should ask earlier, not later.
How does my fertility look like?
And the next generation of female founders will have it easier when?
Men pull their weight in the family.
Last question, Julia. If now, for the founders who want to learn more about your work, also at Outfittery, and get somehow in touch, learn more about what you have to say, what is the best way for them to do that, to learn more about your journey?
So definitely connect with me on LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn, and of course, test the Outfittery service.
100%, which is now not only available for men, but also for women, as I've learned, and I will certainly test it out. Thank you so much, Julia, for being on our show. I truly appreciate that you took the time, that you were so honest, vulnerable. I don't think we don't take it for granted. And it's been so much, yeah, fun, but also deep to talk with you about aspects that we don't often talk about, but all think about.
Thank you, Melanie and Christian. It was great. Thanks for also sharing your stories.
Thank you very much. And this was another episode of our Follow the Gradient podcast.
And now we would love to hear from you. How did you like it? What should we improve? Do you have any suggestions, ideas, or dream podcast guests? Please let us know.
Thank you and see you again next week.